I'd like to respond. Today's paper, Molly Evans has an editorial from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. She opens up by saying the Shiite Republican plot against House Speaker Newt Gingrich has come to naught. How do you react to the use of the term Shiite Republican?
Well, this is that's a good example of the introduction of terms into our culture through the media that have negative stereotypes attached to them. For most people, Shiite has a very negative, and so he's talking within a cultural discourse that's understood by his readers. Negative. Shiite is negative, and that's how it's being introduced. For an Iranian who happens to be an American Iranian, he's going to be offended by that. It's part of the problem with language, is that there's an idea. I mean, political correctness has a lot of problems associated with it because we take it to such absurd lengths. But there is an idea of just being sensitive to people's cultures, and one of the things that the Quran says is, we created you in peoples and tribes that you might come to know one another. And the most noblest of you are the most God-wary. Thomas Cleary, one of the things that he said about that verse is, he said that, we talk about the problem of racism, the problem of all of these attitudes, but we've never really examined how do we break these down. And he thought that Quranic injunction there, that to come to know one another, and this part of what this is all about. This is literally trying to come to know a tradition. How do they view the world? How do you look at things? As a way of understanding a people. And I think the Muslims are as guilty as any other people of being narrow and not trying to understand other. There are some Muslims that come here bringing a lot of their attitudes from other places. And when you come to America, you have to learn what is appropriate within this culture. You have to learn that that you're a guest in a host country. And the same would be for Americans going to a Muslim country. You are a guest in a host country. In this culture we have a saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And there's a wisdom there in that you have to recognize that there are sensitivities. Now, part of the problem, and this is a good example that you've brought up, is the globalization of our world. We are no longer isolated communities. The Turk is no longer the barbarian at the gates of Vienna scaring us, right? The Turk is your doctor, right? I mean, seriously, we're dealing in a world where these barriers have been broken down. There is a great opportunity here. There is a great opportunity. There's also, just as the Chinese know, because their ideogram for opportunity is their ideogram for crises, we are in a crisis state as well, right? We do have white supremacists in this country. We have a very strong anti-Semitic element in this country. We have an anti-Arab, sand niggers, right? We have people that do look at the world in these terms. We're trying to break this down. We're trying to create some civilization here, some humanity. It's a daunting task, but hopefully we can rise to the occasion. I think this is, we can stereotypically say, well, what do you expect from Dallas? Right? I can do that. I say, well, that's just a southern redneck, right? He might be sounds like he's a liberal. He might be, excuse me? She, I'm sorry, yeah. So there, stereotype. Something like that must have come from a man. So, the idea is that it's very easy to stereotype, pigeonhole people, do these things, but unfortunately it creates a lot of animosity, a lot of turbulence and trouble. Another example of that is the word jihad, which is a very, very high word in Islam. It's not a low, it's seen as a really, in the same way we use a crusade in our culture, a crusade is a good thing. He led a crusade against drugs. In the Muslim culture, crusade has a very negative connotation, right? It does. For English-speaking Muslims who know the word crusade, it really conjures up people coming in and slaughtering and attacking pillaging the Muslim heartland. So, language is very, very problematic. And I personally, this is something we live with. I think for me, being an American who became a Muslim was very interesting for me because I grew up part of the dominant culture. I'm a white American. I went to very elite schools in this country. I had a lot of opportunities a lot of other people didn't have. But then becoming a Muslim and seeing how, a lot of Americans relate to me as a Muslim, it suddenly changes. And I did change my name, which you don't have to. I was quite young when I became Muslim and a name was given to me, and I took it. In retrospect, I really don't think that I know that you don't have to, and I don't know if it's really that wise of a thing to do, because I think it creates this idea that, you have to be an Arab to become Muslim, or you have to, many American Muslims that do not change their name, right? But the fact that I do have my legal name is my Muslim name has really caused some very interesting things to happen to me. And my wife, she's Native American, Mexican, Indian, she, because she wears the hijab, during the Gulf crisis, she was spat at, told to go home, go back where you came from, right? It was kind of ironic because, I told her, you need to tell them that you don't need to get on a plane or a boat to go back where you came from. I mean, she's from here. Her roots are from the Sonora Desert. So, very interesting. And she was in a supermarket once with the hijab, and there was a young Mexican girl there who said, the baby was in the basket, and the woman wanted to put the groceries into the basket, and they were both Mexican, and one of them said to the other, in Spanish, just knock him out of the way. And my wife was so upset about that, and she's a very gentle soul. She didn't say anything. I told her, you should have told them, I speak Spanish, and that's not. And I got upset. I went back to the store, and I saw the manager, and I told him what happened. I also reminded him that because it's a store right next to a very large Muslim population, they have a lot of Muslims that buy there, which is always bottom line. If you can bring that in, get some action, right? So then I just told him what happened. He was really horrified, and said he would talk to the people. But we forget that these things do happen. It's very interesting occurrences to feel the brunt of that. Black like me, that type of thing where you suddenly realize there is another world of experience for other people. And for the Muslim, it's just by the fact that they're Muslim. It's not, yeah, it's very interesting. So it goes back to some real basic prejudices and some basic things. And hopefully, I tend to be an optimist. I'm skeptical of a lot of things, but I tend to be an optimist. So, and the Quran does say don't despair. It's not a good thing to do. It's the only unforgivable sin for the Catholics. Right? So.